Hello my diamond art friends, my name is Ilene and welcome to my channel. If you are new to my channel, welcome, and if you are returning, thank you for your continued support and friendship. For this video in WIP Chat, I am going to do some brain anatomy and some fun facts about the brain. And I'm doing this, the canvas I'm doing is called Future Heart. And I am doing it for Dark and Creepy Diamond Paintings Have a Heart, Eat a Brain event. And I figured why not do a WIP Chat about the brain. So let's go ahead and get started with our fun information. So what is the brain? The brain is a complex organ that controls thoughts, memories, emotions, touch, motor skills, vision, breathing, temperature, hunger, and every process that regulates our body. Together, the brain and spinal cord that extends from it make up the central nervous system, or CNS. So what is your brain made of? It weighs about 3 pounds in an average adult, and the brain is about 60% fat, and the remaining 40 is a combination of water, protein, carbohydrates, and salts. The brain itself is not a muscle. It contains blood vessels and nerves, including neurons and cells. So what is the gray matter and the white matter? The gray matter are two different regions of the central nervous system. In the brain, gray matter refers to the darker outer portion, while white matter describes the lighter inner section underneath. In the spinal cord, this is reversed. The white matter is on the outside and the gray matter sits within. Gray matter is primarily composed of neuron somas. They're a round central cell body. And white matter is mostly made up of axons, the long stems that connect the neurons together. So I'll put a little photo of what an actual neuron anatomy looks like right here. And it's wrapped in myelin, which is a protective coating. The different composition of the neuron parts is why the two appear as separate shades on a scan. Each region serves a different role. Gray matter is primarily responsible for processing and interpreting information, while white matter transmits that information to the other parts of the nervous system. So how does the brain work? The brain sends and receives chemical and electric signals throughout the body. Different signals control different processes, and your brain interprets each. Some make you feel tired, for example, while others make you feel pain. Some messages are kept within the brain, while others are relayed through the spine and across the body's vast network of nerves to the distant extremities. To do this, the central nervous system relies on billions of neurons, your nerve cells. The main parts of the brain and their function. At a high level, the brain can be divided into the cerebrum, brainstem, and cerebellum. The cerebrum. The cerebrum, which is the front of the brain, comprises gray matter, the cerebral cortex, and white matter as its center. The largest part of the brain, the cerebrum, initiates and coordinates movement and regulates temperature. Other areas of the cerebrum enable speech, judgment, thinking, reasoning, problem solving, emotions, and learning. Other functions relate to vision, hearing, touch, and other senses. Your cerebral cortex. Cortex is Latin for bark. and describes the outer gray matter covering the cerebrum. The cortex has a large surface area due to its folds and comprises about half of the brain's weight. The cerebral cortex is divided into two halves, or hemispheres. It's covered with ridges and folds. The two halves join at a large, deep sulcus, or an intracephalic fissure, aka the medial longitudinal fissure. Good grief. Can I twist my own tongue up? Yes, I can. And that runs from the front of the head to the back. The right hemisphere controls the left side of the body, and the left controls the right side of the body. The two halves communicate with one another through a large C-shaped structure of white matter and nerve paths called the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is in the center of the cerebellum. Now, I'm sure we all know that the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. My dad always says that because he was left-handed, he was the only one that was ever right in his right mind. He's a funny guy. Anyway, so let's go on to your brain stem. The brain stem, or the middle of the brain, connects the cerebrum with the spinal cord. The brain stem includes the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. The midbrain is a very complex structure with a range of different neuron clusters, nuclei, and colliculi, neural pathways, and other structures. These features facilitate various functions from hearing and movement to calculating responses and environmental changes. The midbrain also contains the substantia nigra, an area that is affected by Parkinson's disease that is rich in dopamine neurons and part of the basal ganglia, which enables movement and coordination. Pons. The pons is the origin of 4 of the 12 cranial nerves, which enable a range of activities such as tear production, chewing, blinking, focusing vision, balance, hearing, facial expressions. I should have said and facial expressions. Named for the Latin word for bridge, the pons is the connection between the midbrain and the medulla. The medulla. At the bottom of the brain stem, the medulla is where the brain meets the spinal cord. The medulla is essential to survival. Functions of the medulla regulates many bodily activities, including heart rhythm, breathing, blood flow, and oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. The medulla produces reflexive activities such as sneezing, vomiting, coughing, and swallowing. The spinal cord extends from the bottom of the medulla and through a large opening in the bottom of the skull. Supported by the vertebrae, the spinal cord carries messages to and from the brain and the rest of the body. The cerebellum, or little brain, is a fish-sized portion of the brain located at the back of the head, below the temporal and occipital lobes and above the brainstem. Like the cerebral cortex, it has 2 hemispheres. The outer portion contains neurons, and the inner area communicates with the cerebral cortex. Its function is to coordinate voluntary muscle movement, and to maintain posture, balance, and equilibrium. There are studies being conducted that explore the cerebellum's role in thought, emotions, and social behaviors, as well as its possible involvement in addiction, autism, and schizophrenia. So, your brain covering, your meninges. 3 layers of protective covering called meninges surround the brain and the spinal cord. The outer layer is the dura mater. It is thick and tough. It includes 2 layers. So, the peristeel layer of the dura mater lines the inner dome of the skull, or cranium, and the meningeal layer is below that. Spaces between the layers allow for the passage of veins and arteries that supply blood flow to the brain. The arachnoid matter is a thin web-like layer of connective tissue that does not contain nerves or blood vessels. Below the arachnoid matter is the cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. This fluid cushions the entire central nervous system, brain, and spinal cord, and continually circulates around these structures to remove impurities. The pia mater is a thin membrane that hugs the surface of the brain and follows its contours. The pia mater is rich with veins and arteries, lobes of the brain, and what they control. Each brain hemisphere, or the part of the cerebrum, has 4 sections called lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. Each lobe controls specific functions. The frontal lobe, the largest lobe of the brain, located in the front of the head. The frontal lobe is involved in personality characteristics, decision-making, and movement. Recognition of smell usually involves parts of the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe contains the Broca area, which is associated with a speech ability. The parietal lobe. The middle of the brain, or the parietal lobe, helps a person identify objects and understand spatial relationships, where one's body is compared with objects around the person. The parietal lobe is also involved in interpreting pain and touch in the body. The parietal lobe houses Wernicke's area, which helps the brain understand spoken language. The occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is the back part of the brain that is involved with vision. The temporal lobe. The sides of the brain. Temporal lobes are involved in short-term memory, speech, musical rhythm, and some degree of smell recognition. Now you have deeper structures within the brain, which I'm not going to go too in-depth about, but you do have deeper structures, which are the pituitary gland, and they're considered the master gland. It's a pea-sized structure, and what it does is the pituitary gland governs the function of other glands in the body and regulates the flow of hormones from the thyroid, the adrenals, ovaries, and testicles. It receives chemical signals from the hypothalamus through its stalk and blood supply. And the hypothalamus is located above the pituitary gland, and it says chemical messages that controls its function. It also regulates body temperature, synchronizes sleep pattern, controls hunger and thirst, and plays a role in some aspects of memory and emotion. Now, we have something called the hippocampus, and that's a curved seahorse-shaped organ, and it's the underside of the temporal lobe. The hippocampus is part of a larger structure called the hippocampal formation, and it supports memory, learning, navigation, perception of space, and it receives information from the cerebral cortex, and it is believed that it may play a role in Alzheimer's disease. The pineal gland is located deep in the brain, and it's attached by a stalk to the top of the third ventricle, and it responds to light and dark and secretes melatonin, which regulates the circadian rhythm and the sleep-wake cycle. I'm not going to go into the ventricles and cerebral spinal fluid, I don't think, but I will let you know that, as mentioned before, we have 12 cranial nerves, and the cranial 1 nerve is the olfactory nerve, which allows for your sense of smell. Cranial nerve 2 is the optic nerve, which governs eyesight. Cranial nerve 3 is your oculomotor nerve, and it controls pupil response and other motion of the eye, and branches out from the area in the brainstem where the midbrain meets the pons. Cranial nerve 4 is your trochlear nerve, which controls the muscles in the eye, and it emerges from the back of the midbrain to the brainstem. Cranial nerve 5 is the trigeminal nerve, and it's the largest and most complex of the cranial nerves with both sensory and motor function. And it originates from the pons and conveys sensations from the scalp, teeth, jaw, sinuses, and part of the mouth and face to the brain, allowing the function of chewing, muscles, and much more. Cranial nerve 6 is the abduction nerves, which innervates some of the muscles in the eye. Cranial nerve 7, the facial nerve, supports facial movement, taste, glandular, and other functions. Cranial nerve 8 is the vestibulocochlear nerve, which facilitates balance and hearing. Cranial nerve 9 is the glossopharyngeal nerve, which allows taste, ear, and throat movement, and has many more functions. Cranial nerve 10 is the vagus nerve, which allows sensation around the ear and the digestive system and controls motor activity in the heart, throat, and digestive system. Cranial nerve 11 is your accessory nerve, which innervates specific muscles in the head, neck, and shoulders. And the last of the cranial nerves, our cranial nerve 12, is the hypoglossal nerve, which supplies motor activity to the tongue. The first 2 nerves originate in the cerebrum. The remaining 10 cranial nerves emerge from the brainstem, which has 3 parts. Again, the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. So I do have some amazing brain facts, and they are based on some of the latest science as of 2019 that we may find interesting as we kind of learn a little bit more about the brain. Let me take a little swig of my water first, though. There are a lot of myths and misinformation about the brain that are passed on as brain facts. This is somewhat understandable. The study of the human brain is one of the least explored areas in science, and even more experts agree that there is more we don't know about the brain than we currently do. In recent years, we are gaining more knowledge about the brain. Most of what we know about the brain has been discovered in about the last 15 to 20 years. Some real brain facts have always entered, but some real brain facts haven't really entered mainstream awareness yet. So, here are some of the most recent, as of 2019, brain facts. The typical brain comprises about 2% of the body's total weight, but uses 20% of its total energy and oxygen intake. Can anybody guess about how much of our brain is water? Your brain is 73% water. It takes only 2% dehydration to affect your attention, memory, and other cognitive skills. "90 minutes of sweating can temporarily shrink the brain as much as 1 year of aging does." Your brain weighs about 3 pounds. 60% of the dry weight is fat, making the brain the most fatty organ in the body. "25% of the body's cholesterol resides within the brain. Cholesterol is an integral part of every brain cell. Without adequate cholesterol, brain cells die." No one knows for sure, but the latest estimate is our brains contain 86 billion brain cells. Each neuron can transmit 1,000 nerve impulses per second and makes as many as tens of thousands of synaptic contact with other neurons. A piece of brain tissue the size of a grain of sand contains 100,000 neurons and 1 billion synapses, all communicating with each other. The brain cell, all brain cells are not alike. There are as many as 10,000 specific types of neurons in the brain. Your brain needs a constant supply of oxygen. As little as 5 minutes without oxygen can cause some brain cells to die, leading to severe brain damage. Babies have big heads to hold rapidly growing brains. A 2-year-old's brain is 80% of adult size. As a parent can attest, teenage brains are not fully formed. It isn't until about the age of 25 that the human brain reaches full maturity. Does anybody know how fast brain information can travel? Brain information travels up to an impressive 268 miles per hour. This is faster than Formula One race cars, which top out at 240 miles per hour. So does anybody happen to know how much electricity in watts our brains generate? Your brain generates about 12 to 25 watts of electricity. This is enough to power a low wattage LED light. Would that help us save on the electric bill? Just a joke. Anyway, there is a reason a brain has been called a random thought generator. The average brain is believed to generate up to 50,000 thoughts per day. Every minute, 750 to 1,000 milliliters of blood flows through the brain. This is enough to fill a bottle of wine or a liter of soda. Your brain can process an image that your eye has seen for as little as 13 milliseconds, less time than it takes for you to blink. Now, we're going to talk about brain size. In general, men's brains are 10% bigger than women's, even after taking into account larger body size. However, the hippocampus, the part of the brain most strongly linked to memory, is typically larger in women. Well, of course, I can remember any argument I've ever had with Jamie, and I can tell him every single word he said. Yep. But there are some things I forget. But that, I can remember every disagreement we've ever had. I don't care if his brain's 10% bigger. It's fine with me. Albert Einstein's brain weighed 2.71 pounds, 10% smaller than that of the average 3 pounds. However, the neuron density of his brain was greater than average. How do they know? Did he donate his brain to science? I'll have to see if I can figure that out. How did they know how much his brain weighed? How did they figure that out? Neanderthal brains were 10% larger than our Homo sapien brains. While humans have the largest brains proportional to body weight of all the animals, we don't have the biggest brains. That distinction belongs to the sperm whale with a 17-pound brain. Human brains have gotten significantly smaller over the past 10,000 to 20,000 years. The lost volume is equivalent to the size of a tennis ball. The hippocampus, the part of the brain considered the memory center, is significantly larger in London cab drivers. This is due to the mental workout they get while navigating the 25,000 streets of London. The effect of modern lifestyle on the brain. Chronic stress and depression are rampant in modern life. Either can cause measurable brain shrinkage. The modern diet is low in omega-3 essential fatty acid. Low level of omega-3s result in brain shrinkage equivalent to 2 years of structural brain aging. Since the Victorian era, the average IQ has gone down 1.6 points per decade for a total of 13.35 points. Technology has forced most of us to be prodigious multitaskers. But your brain can't learn or concentrate on two things at once. What it can do is quickly toggle back and forth between tasks. But doing so decreases your attention span, ability to learn, short-term memory, and overall mental performance. Unexpectedly, millennials aged 18 to 34 are more forgetful than baby boomers. They are more likely to forget what day it is or where they put their keys than their parents. Attention spans are getting shorter. In 2000, the average attention span was 12 seconds. Now it's 8 seconds. That's shorter than the 9-second attention span of an average goldfish. Brain cells cannibalize themselves as a latch-ditch source of energy to ward off starvation. So, in a very real way, dieting, especially low-fat diets, can force your brain to eat itself. Over 140 proteins in the brain are negatively impacted by exposure to electromagnetic frequencies, the kind emitted by your cell phone and other electronic devices. Relying on GPS to navigate destroys your innate sense of direction, a skill that took our ancestors thousands of years to develop and hone. When areas of the brain involved in navigation are no longer used, those neural connections fade away via a process known as synaptic pruning. Now we're going to debunk some myths. A popular myth that we only use 10% of our brains is flat out wrong. Brain scans clearly show that we use most of our brains most of the time, even when we're sleeping. There is no such thing as a left brain or right brain personality skill types. You are not left-brained or right-brained. We are whole-brained. In spite of what you've been told, alcohol does not kill brain cells. What excessive alcohol consumption can do is damage the connective tissue at the end of the neurons. The Mozart effect has been debunked. While listening to certain kinds of music can improve memory and concentration, there's nothing unique about listening to Mozart. You may have heard that we have more brain cells than there are stars in the Milky Way, but that's not true. Best guessed estimates are that we have 86 billion neurons, while there are 200 to 400 billion stars in the Milky Way. It's often said that there are 10,000 miles of blood vessels in the brain when actually that number is closer to 400 miles. Still, that's a substantial amount. Contrary to the prevailing medical belief, having high total cholesterol is not bad for your brain. In fact, high cholesterol actually reduces the risk of dementia. Well, then we'll see what happens with me because my cholesterol was borderline high last time. We shall see. Until recently, it was a fact that we were born with a set level of intelligence and number of brain cells. But it has since been discovered that our brain has the capacity to change throughout our lifetime due to a property known as brain plasticity. The brain can continue to form new brain cells via a process known as neurogenesis. Okay, fact about brain and memory. Memory is better thought as an activity rather than being associated with a specific area of the brain. Any memory is deconstructed and distributed in different parts of the brain. Then, for the memory to be recalled, it has to be reconstructed from individual fragments. Your brain starts slowing down at the ripe old age of 24, but peaks for different cognitive skills at different ages. In fact, at any given age, you're likely better to have some things, and you're likely getting better at some things and worse at others. An extreme case of vocabulary skills, which may peak as late as your early 70s. If you're drinking alcohol and don't remember what you did last night, it's not because you forgot. While you were drunk, your brain is incapable of forming memories. It's generally believed that people with exceptional memories are born that way, but this is rarely the case. Most memory masters will tell you that having an outstanding memory is a skill they developed by employing the best memory techniques. Facts about brain form and function. Brain tissue is not dense. It's very fragile, soft and squishy, similar to the consistency of soft tofu or gelatin. The brain produces a half cup of fluid every day. It floats in the bath of cerebral spinal fluid, which acts as a shock absorber to keep the brain from being crushed by its own weight. Sometimes half a brain is good as a whole one. When surgeons operate to stop seizures, they remove and disable half of the brain in a procedure known as a hemiphorectomy. Shockingly, patients experience no effect on personality or memory. Your brain has a pattern of connectivity as unique as your fingerprint. Although pain is produced in your brain has no pain receptors and feels no pain. This explains how brain surgery can be performed while the patient is awake with no pain or discomfort. Headache pain feels like it starts in your brain, but it is caused by sensations from nearby skin, joints, sinuses, blood vessels, or muscles. Brain freeze sure feels like pain in the brain, but is an example of referring pain emanating from the roof of the mouth. Fortunately, brain freeze does not freeze brain cells because frozen brain cells rupture and turn to mush. The brains of introverts and extroverts are measurably different. MRIs reveal that the dopamine reward network is more active in the brains of extroverts, while introverts' brains have more gray matter. According to research done at Cambridge University, The order of lettering in the words doesn't matter much to your brain as long as the first and the last letters are in the right spot. Your brain can rearrange the letters to form the word as fast as you can read. This is why you can easily make sense out of jumbled letters. How the brain compares to a computer. Your brain storage capacity is considered virtually unlimited. It doesn't get used up like the RAM of your computer. The latest research shows that the brain's memory capacity is a quadrillion or 1,015 bytes. Astoundingly, this is not the same amount needed to store the entire internet. The human brain is capable of 1,016 processes per second, which makes it far more powerful than any existing computer. Researchers involved in AI Impact Project have developed a way to compare supercomputers to brains by measuring how fast a computer can move information around within its own system. By this standard, the human brain is 30 times more powerful than an IBM Sequoia, one of the world's fastest supercomputers. Evidence our brains could be better. There's almost 200 known cognitive biases and distortions that cause us to think and act irrationally. Memories are shockingly unreliable and change over time. Emotions, motivation, cue, context, and frequency of use can all affect how accurately we remember things. This includes flashbulb memories which occur during traumatic events. Of the thousands of thoughts a person has every day, it's estimated that 70% of the mental chatter is negative, self-critical, pessimistic, and fearful. The human brain is extraordinarily complex and consequently can go awry in so many spectacular ways. Some of the strangest disorders include exploding head syndrome disorder, hearing phantom explosions in your head, or thinking your loved ones have been substituted by imposters, robots, or aliens, or believing you are dead. Most savants are born that way, but a brain trauma can cause acquired savant syndrome, where ordinary people suddenly develop genius-level abilities they didn't have before. Brain cells need a constant supply of fuel to stay alive, yet they lack the ability to store energy. Fortunately, there's a backup system. Your liver breaks down stored fat to produce ketone bodies that can be used as a substitute fuel when commonly used blood glucose is not available. And then my last couple I'm going to tell you are just some weird brain facts. The brain in your head isn't your brain. There's a second brain in your intestine that contains 100 million neurons. Gut bacteria are responsible for making over 30 neurotransmitters, including the happy molecule serotonin. Some scientists believe zombies could actually be created. They think it's possible to mutate viruses or parasites that could be used to attack the brain and rapidly spread throughout large populations, essentially causing a zombie apocalypse. Users of Apple devices really are different than those who use Android products. It's not your imagination. MRIs reveal that Apple products stimulate the God spot in their users' brains, the same part of the brain that is activated by religious imagery and in people of faith. And then the last fact that I have. Few facts about the brain are as strange as the posthumous story of Albert Einstein's brain. The pathologist who performed Einstein's autopsy kept the brain in a jar in his basement for 40 years. Eventually, he made a cross-country trip with the brain in a Tupperware container to deliver it to Einstein's granddaughter. Well, they were my interesting brain facts. So what did you guys all think? I know I kind of rushed it a little bit, but I only did record about 50 minutes-ish of me diamond painting, because the first one that I filmed, which was an hour, well, it would not load correctly, and I couldn't get it to be able to allow me to get it edited. So there was probably something that killed it when I was filming it. So, yeah. I do want to thank you guys for sticking with me to listen to my WIP chat, or my information on the brain. I really do enjoy doing these, and I will get back to doing it the old way, likely next week. But I'm probably just going to find facts to do. And then when I'm going to do information-based ones, I'm going to probably do voiceovers like this. Either way, they're both kind of fun for me, and I learn a lot, and I get to kind of edit and do some fun things. So that is going to be my WIP chat for this week on the brain. So please like and comment, and have yourself a nice day or night, whatever it is for you. Take care. Happy diamond painting. And until my next video, bye.